U.S. hypocrisy exposed as Trump calls for restraint while expanding America's nuclear arsenal. Washington continues to pressure Tehran over its nuclear program even as its own nuclear spending hits record levels. Anti-nuclear watchdog reports the U.S. spent $69.2 billion on nuclear weapons in 2025 alone. America's nuclear budget is now larger than that of all other nuclear-armed states combined. Russia issues warning as Trump considers expanding NATO's nuclear footprint amid rising global tensions. U.S. nuclear spending surged by nearly 25% in 2025 compared with the previous year, according to a report by nuclear watchdog ICAN. The United States spent an estimated $69.2 billion on its nuclear arsenal in 2025, exceeding the combined spending of all other nuclear-armed states, ICAN said. The Nobel Peace Prize-winning group's latest report was highlighted by RT on June 10 as concerns over a renewed global arms race continue to grow. The watchdog said U.S. nuclear weapons spending increased by $12.4 billion in a single year, marking a sharp 22% rise from 2024 levels. The world's 9 nuclear-armed states collectively spent a record $119 billion on their nuclear arsenals last year, according to ICAN's findings. Combined nuclear spending by those 9 powers rose by 19% year-on-year as geopolitical tensions intensified across multiple regions. ICAN said the surge was driven by spending from the US, Russia, China, the UK, France, India, Pakistan, Israel, and North Korea. China ranked as the world's second-largest nuclear spender, allocating an estimated $13.5 billion toward its nuclear forces. Meanwhile, the United Kingdom overtook Russia in annual nuclear spending, dedicating $12.6 billion compared with Moscow's reported $9.5 billion. ICAN estimated the 9 nuclear powers have spent a combined $471 billion on nuclear weapons programs since 2021. The group argued that a single year of global nuclear weapons spending could have funded the United Nations core budget for decades. The United States is also discussing the possibility of stationing nuclear weapons in additional NATO member states, the Financial Times reported. Poland and several Baltic states have reportedly expressed interest in hosting U.S. nuclear weapons as security concerns continue to mount. Notably, the U.S. currently stores nuclear bombs in Belgium, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Turkey under NATO arrangements. Washington is said to be exploring these deployments to calm European partners worried about planned reductions in U.S. conventional forces stationed across the continent. This debate comes as the U.S. shifts military resources toward Asia and other strategic regions, prompting concerns in Europe that their security may no longer be Washington's primary focus. Poland and several Baltic states have reportedly expressed interest in hosting U.S. nuclear weapons on their territory, arguing that such deployments would significantly strengthen their security. Eastern NATO members justify these requests by pointing to what they describe as growing security threats from Russia, including its military posture and nuclear signaling near their borders. Reports indicate that more than 80,000 U.S. troops were stationed across Europe during 2025, reflecting the still substantial American military footprint on the continent. However, the Pentagon recently canceled a planned rotation of about 4,000 troops into Poland, a move that has raised questions in Warsaw about future U.S. commitments. Washington also announced the withdrawal of 5,000 U.S. soldiers from Germany, further feeding allied concerns about a gradual thinning of American forces in core European states. Currently, 6 NATO members host U.S. nuclear weapons and associated delivery aircraft, forming the backbone of the alliance's nuclear sharing arrangements. These host countries include Belgium, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Turkey, and the United Kingdom, all of which integrate U.S. nuclear capabilities into their national air forces. At the same time, Moscow continues to condemn NATO's military expansion and infrastructure buildup near Russian territory, describing it as a direct threat to its national security. Russian officials have repeatedly warned that any nation hosting what they call anti-Russian nuclear weapons could find itself designated as a priority target in a future conflict. On June 3, Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov issued a direct nuclear warning, signaling that further U.S. nuclear deployments in Europe could prompt a sharp Russian response. Sergei Ryabkov said, and I quote, "As regards us, those hypothetical extreme situations that may trigger the use of these weapons were outlined in detail in Russia's military doctrine and the fundamentals of Russia's state policy on nuclear deterrence. To put it somewhat straightforwardly, these documents send a signal that encroachments on Russia or its territorial integrity by aggressors, including those who may possess such weapons, could prompt us to use these weapons in the worst-case scenario. End quote. Tensions have once again escalated as Ukraine increased the scale and frequency of attacks deep inside Russian territory. On June 10th, Ukraine acknowledged using FP-5 Flamingo missiles in strikes targeting Russian military assets. Volodymyr Zelensky claimed the Flamingo missiles successfully struck key Russian military facilities with precision. The Ukrainian operation targeted a facility in Cheboksary that reportedly housed critical military infrastructure. According to reports, the Russian site contained satellite navigation receivers and components for missiles and drones, and was set ablaze. 3 people were reportedly injured in the aftermath of the Ukrainian strikes in Cheboksary. The Ukrainian president also outlined details of additional operations targeting Russia's oil infrastructure. Zelensky said, and I quote, "We continue to apply Ukrainian long-range sanctions against Russian military facilities and the oil industry." In particular, last night Ukrainian FP-5 Flamingos struck a military plant in Cheboksary that supplies the occupiers' army with components for drones and missiles. I thank the armed forces of Ukraine for their precision. The Kuibyshev oil refinery in the Samara region was also hit last night. The distance from the front line is more than 900 kilometers. I am grateful to the warriors of the Special Operations Forces, the Unmanned Systems Forces, and the Defense Intelligence of Ukraine. The entirely just responses of the Security Service of Ukraine also reached 2 oil infrastructure facilities in the Vladimir region, at a distance of 700 kilometers. I thank everyone who fights and works for Ukraine. End quote. In Samara Oblast, Kiev struck the Kuibyshev oil refinery, located more than 900 kilometers from the front line. Russia's Samara oil facility processes approximately 3.7 million tons of oil annually and remains a critical energy asset. 2 additional oil facilities in Russia's Vladimir Oblast were also reportedly targeted by Ukrainian forces. Fires were allegedly reported at both oil plants following the drone attacks carried out by Ukraine. Meanwhile, the Kremlin condemned another Ukrainian strike targeting an iconic museum in Sevastopol. According to reports, historic artwork was lost in the blaze that followed the attack on the museum.
Last night, a drone strike virtually destroyed the siege of Sevastopol Museum. The museum building has been damaged. The strike was deliberate. Is the president's reaction to this known? And does the Kremlin share the view of the Sevastopol governor and museum staff that it should be restored, as was done following the damage in 1942?
We can see that the Kiev regime has begun to attack history. But history cannot be defeated. Just as we cannot be made to forget this history, such attacks only serve to underline the justice of our cause in our struggle for the Russian regions. This struggle will end in victory. This ruined site, so important in terms of symbolism and historical significance, will be restored and will be even more beautiful than before.